What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Long Game Podcast hosted by Thomas Kopelman and Jacob Turner. In each episode, you'll hear us break down financial topics that are relevant to you and your situation. Our goal is to help bring credible financial information to you in short, bite-sized episodes.
All opinions expressed on this show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on the Long Game Podcast should be considered advice. Always consult with your team of professionals before making any decisions regarding your finances.
All right, what is up, and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Long Game Podcast. Today, we are joined by Rafael Loureiro. I think I got it right there. I should be able to get it right because Rafa and I would say we're good friends at this point. He is the co-founder of Wealth.com, which is where I'm the head of community of. He's also built a few really cool businesses, exited an awesome business before this for right around $500 million. So, Raf, thanks for joining us today, man.
No, thank you for having me here. Super happy to be here with you and Jacob.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this today. So we've never really had anybody on we've talked to plenty of business owners. We talked about plenty of people who've grown businesses, but I don't think we've talked to a lot of people who have grown and exited an awesome business while also raising capital and then starting another one. And, you know, I thought this was an interesting point. So when we were at a conference last year, one of the strategic advisors for Wealth, Joanne Bradford, was there, and everybody knows her. She's been on, C-levels. She's a C-level exec for Microsoft and Honey and all these really cool companies. And she made an interesting point that she'll never invest in a company with a first-time founder. And so I think there's this really cool maybe wisdom that you might have of being a first-time founder, what you learned. And so the goal of this podcast is really to get an understanding of like what you learned the first time going through basically building and selling a business, what you learned from that and are applying to the second one. And also just lessons of, how do you raise capital? How do you get prepared? What do you do in seed rounds? How to find the right opportunities to do that? Because I've never talked to anybody specifically on the podcast for it. And I didn't think there would be anybody better to talk to than you.
All right, thank you. So let me start from the beginning, right? So before Wealth.com, we had another company in a completely different space, fraud prevention. The company was called Emailage, right? So it's the combination of the word email with the word age, like the age of the email.
Yep.
And there were like several situations where people actually told us, hey, you should change the name of the company. But at that point, we already had like enough market share that we decided to stick with the name until the end. And I'm glad that we did. When I joined the company, I was not one of the original founders. I joined as a C-level right before Series A. So I was there when I joined the company, I had 4 people in my team. I was the chief technology officer. And when the company was sold, beginning of COVID, 2020, I had 65 people in my team, right? So I experienced the growth and all the mistakes that came with it. Different time that we have right now, but 2015, joined the company. One of the first lessons is how do you keep culture growing a company fast, right? So, and that's what happened when you do series, when you get external money, right? They give you the money, but there's a mandate. It's not like, hey, I'm giving you the money and grow at whatever speed you think is good for you. No. We have deadlines, we have metrics to hit, and sometimes you have to move fast. And the fact that you have to move fast, you hire a lot of people and you make a lot of mistakes, right? So when I can see Joanne's point when she says, hey, your likelihood of investing in a second founder and getting a positive outcome is much better than the first-time founder. Because with the second-time founder, you made already plenty of mistakes. And one of them is like hiring. The second one is you're already super connected with investors, right? They know you. So if you need to raise capital, like Wealth.com, I'm not going to say easy, but I'm going to say easier than a first-time founder. Because they know you. They know that you can deliver, right? They know you can go from beginning to execution. So you reduce your chance of pick the wrong horse to bet, right? When you're second. The other thing too, and we were able to actually leverage with Wealth.com is Since Wealth.com is a non-competing business compared to the previous company, I was able to bring all my A players because it's a non-competing business, right? So I brought my developers, I brought my engineers, I brought security, I brought sales. So we're able to hit the ground running and keep a very amazing culture. Because in my mind, I mean, I know it sounds cheesy. You hear this a lot, but in my mind, I mean, the best measure for success in a startup is having the right team.
Which obviously is really hard to do a lot of times because at early stage startups, salaries are not as good typically. Obviously, you have the benefit of equity compensation, but I do think you made a really interesting point here. Like, right, culture is something easier for you to build because you've brought over people who helped build a good culture before. I think that's, that hits on number one for you. But I think the other part about it is the non-competing business. I could see people going both ways on this, right? Like, I think there is value in the, hey, well, I went to a non-competing business that has similarities in tech and how to build tech and create things like that. So there are the similarities in what you know. I think there's probably a lot of people who would say like non-competing businesses, like, why wouldn't you bring over everything you know to something really similar? But I think your point's really valid that you wouldn't have been able to. I'm sure you had a non-compete and you probably wouldn't be able to bring over any of your team members. So it'd be starting way more from scratch.
You are 100% right. So establish the right team, right? So we made a mistake in the previous company. We hired too fast, diluted the culture, had to go through a lot of layoffs, which is never good for your team. Second thing, and speaking from someone that was the head of IT, right? We had invested in data centers. So you guys know financial advisor here. So we had a lot of capital in data centers, and it was hard for us to quickly onboard new clients, right? And I mean, when you think about clients for my previous companies, think about Coinbase, American Express, Goldman Sachs. So during Thanksgiving, the first years, I was always in front of my laptop saying, oh my gosh, I hope we can hold the traffic, because the traffic would 10x during Thanksgiving, Cyber Monday. So it was the busiest time of the year for me. I was never off. As part of my job, I started moving everything from data centers to the cloud. And that's not a cost savings, right? I mean, I know like the cloud providers are trying to convince you, oh no, yeah, go to the cloud and you're going to save money. No, it's going to cost you more money. But the benefit is you can scale quickly, right? So my previous company, we had 5 regions. What does that mean? Is like we had 5 data centers spread throughout the world, 2 in the US, 2 in Europe, and 1 in South America. So anytime we had a peak in traffic, I would expand those data centers. So that was something else that I learned the hard way, right? So with Wealth.com, from day 0, I was like, guys, we're not gonna own a single server. Let's be cloud from day 0. Let's do everything serverless. So that was another painful lesson for us coming from the previous company.
When you talk about when you talk about culture, real quick, to kind of, because I think this is really interesting. A lot of the people that listen to this podcast are small business owners. So you talked about on your team at your previous company, you went from having 4 to 60 people. And a lot of the small business owners that Thomas and I work with, people that listen to this podcast, they might have somewhere between 4 to 60 people in their company. So I'm curious, what are some tactical, strategical things that you guys feel like you've done differently at Wealth.com than they were doing previously in order to keep that culture where it's very much a high performance culture, but it's also a culture that people want to be working there?
Well, and let me add something there. I think the interesting thing of now being affiliated with Wealth and going to events with them and seeing things is what they've done is created a really great culture of people who like really buy in and don't just work the traditional 9 to 5. Like when I'm with the team, there are people there that are working basically what feels like 24/7. They're not the co-founders. They're not the business owners, but they bought into the vision so much where they're like work at it like I work for my business, which is something I almost never see. Most people who are an employee of a business, 9 to 5, you shut your computer. If a message comes over the weekend, you don't even think about it, right? Like that's not part of it. I work 9 to 5. That's my role. I do it. So I am curious to hear your answer on this.
Yeah. So that's one thing when I'm interviewing people, and you can ask anyone that I interview, I always make sure they understand that, hey, look, startup is it's a different beast, right? If you come in here think it's going to be 9 to 5, it's not. At the same time, I respect your weekend, I respect your nights, but if there is an emergency, I expect you to jump in, right? On the other hand, anyone working for wealth.com, anyone working for Emailage, they had shares from day zero. I don't care what role you played, you had shares, right? And with like Emailage exit, a bunch of people were able to pay off their houses, pay off their cars, student debt. It was meaningful for everyone involved, right? So that's one thing. One part of culture that I try to hit strong when people join wealth.com is ownership. We're all owners. Treat these as if it was your company. If it was your company, would you allow a customer to wait 24 hours to get a reply to your email? No, you would not. So why are you waiting? You know what I mean? It's your company. I mean, we're all rowing the boat the same direction, right? So ownership, move fast, right? Fail and recover quickly. So I'm never going to punish anyone because they tried something new and it failed, right? Because I mean, you have to be always learning, trying something new to see if you can grow the business, right? With the engineering team, I'm always like, deploy, release it. Let the customer tell us if they don't like it, right? So let's iterate fast. That's my fourth startup, right? So I've had a chance to work with big corporations, Accenture, to name one, right? And it's always tough to be in an environment that to see something in production, it takes like 6 months. I mean, after 6 months, the customer might even not want what you deploy into production, right? So we want to change this. I mean, the culture for us is like we move fast, we fail fast, we try. Everybody's an owner, and you gotta do this, and you gotta get cheesy to a point where I actually had a manifesto I printed out for my team, and it was up on the wall, right? Because when you're talking to people and you're trying to change their mindset, I'm like, hey, I believe that. And if I'm not doing this, you remind me, right?
Yeah, I think the whole mission idea sounds cheesy to a lot of people of like having some vision, but pretty much everything you'll ever read or every study ever done shows that like people that are mission driven or like you have a team, right? Like a team who's mission driven on winning a championship and knowing they can do that is going to work differently than a team who's just like, hey, we're playing and like, if we get some wins, this is going to be a good season. And I think it's something of finances. Like there's a lot of advisors who do that with their clients' financial plans is like the mission statement or their vision of like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what do you want your life to look like? Those people are more likely going to do the right things with their money because there's a deeper meaning behind what they're doing. But I think that can be hard to do inside of a company, right? I think as a founder, it's really easy, right? You know the vision, you know why you built this, you know where you're going. As an employee, you're kind of like, this is my job, right? And getting people to buy in is definitely really challenging, something I think that you've done really well. But I'm curious. So let's talk about raising money, right? Because I think this is an area where it was definitely easier to do years ago, harder to do today. But I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned going through seed rounds because a lot of the people I talk to, I'm working with some business owners that are starting to go through this, not quite seed round level, but more of just like, hey, let's have some private equity, buy out part of our business. We're going to grow and we'll exit in a few years. And it's a scary time, right? Because you go from like, it's me and my company, I'm making all the decisions to now a lot of pressure. And so I'd love to hear from you of, some of the things that you think are really important to get right.
Yeah. So get the right team in place. It helps a lot, right? That's the first thing, my first recommendation. Raising money with Emailage was harder. We're like first-time founders. We're going to San Francisco. I mean, who are these guys? I mean, this Brazilian with accent trying to sell me a fraud prevention tool, but truly, right? I mean, we're a company in Arizona. So I think kudos to Ray Carvalho. He's the Wealth.com executive chairman and former CEO of Emailage. I mean, he was super persistent, him and Amador, right? So they're the original co-founders. And I had a chance to join a lot of the meetings. And it's learn as you go, right? You present the pitch deck, and as you go into the pitch deck, and you have 30 minutes. If their eyes start glazing over, you're not hitting the right tone. try something different, right? Luckily, there are plenty of VCs in the world, right? I think now we have something like 20,000 VCs. And I just want to make sure that there's a difference between PE money and VC money, right? So we can cover that, right? Because you mentioned PE money. So it's different. I'm talking about venture capital, not PE money. So they give you the money and then you have to hit some goals. I mean, they usually request for a board seat, but they're not in the day-to-day, right? You running the show, pretty much, right? With PE is a little different, right? Sometimes they actually replace some of the leadership. They put their own people to run the company. So talking about VC, it was tough to raise our first Series A. Relationship plays a big role, right? Knowing people like Joanne Bradford, Brian Hamburger, these people are super connected, right? So if they believe in you, so I would say bring some advisors early on, people that can open doors for you if you are new to this space. There is also a big difference between bootstrap and venture capital that I want to touch, right? A lot of people here, they say, no, VC is the wrong way to go because you're going to get money. Now you have these people that you have to report to, and you no longer control your destiny. I have a different belief, right? I believe that with VC money, you can get where you want to get faster. And if you find the right VC, it's not only going to be money. And that's something important, right? A dollar is a dollar is a dollar, but a dollar with someone that has operational experience, someone that can actually make introductions, open doors for you, can totally accelerate the growth of the company, right? So in Ledger, we did a Series A round. It was a $5 million Series A, small compared to today's numbers, right? But that was all the way back in 2015. That money was critical for us, not only because it was an injection of capital to the company, but it also brought some big players, some VCs, that start opening door for us and making introductions, right? We raised 2 rounds, a Series A. Series B was much easier because it's all about your performance. Just like if you have an IRA, are you hitting the numbers? Is your burn good? Do you have a path to profitability? Do you dominate your market? Or are you the top 3 players? Do you have a IP? Something that you can protect and say, hey, this is mine, no one else owns this. With Series B, you already know if you have these five elements, right? So it was much easier, not easier to raise a Series B. Okay, now let's go back to wealth.com. We sold the company in 2020, the previous company, to LexisNexis. I went to work for the acquirer for 1 year. During that time, I thought, hey, I'm done with startups. I've done my due. It's a lot of work. Back to your point, Thomas. I mean, it's a lot of nights, a lot of weekends. You saw it, right? I mean, you've been with us to some of the conference. I mean, standing up all day, always bringing the energy. So it takes a toll on you. At the same time, it's your company. It's your baby, right? I mean, you're creating something that has your face, like you guys are doing with your firms, right? With Wealth, it was much easier to raise capital because it was a second. We had a company before. We were super successful. We had a team. We had an idea, and we had the domain wealth.com. So that helped us raise $16 million in 2021 to actually work on the idea and launch the product in May 2022.
I think you made a bunch of interesting points there. And I think, something people often think with VC is that if we take on money, then they're going to take control. We're not going to be able to dictate where things go. But I think because of that fear, there's a lot of people who do try to bootstrap it, and they have an idea and they're like, okay, great. Like, I'm going to create it. I'm going to create the vision. I don't really have very much money to do it. And all that ends up happening is they get further behind, or they end up being, we thought we were first to market, and then now we're significantly behind because other people put money into developing it. I think the other point that you made that was really interesting is the doors that VC can open for you. I don't think that's something that people think about, but when you get more people on your team that need to succeed because they put a lot of dollars behind it, there's not very many people that are more well-connected than VC, and having other people try to push for your success is going to be huge, right? I mean, you might not know all of these people. They might bring that whole network. You have the product, the idea, and you can execute on it, but selling might be the hard part that they can help you with.
100%. I mean, there's one more thing to help you a lot too is operations. So let's say I'm working on new pricing and packaging. My team is too small, so I don't have someone with experience. I can actually call my VC and say, hey, do you know anyone that can help with this? Right? They actually have on staff people that, a case in point, Joanne Bradford, she used to be COO of SoFi. She used to be CRO for Microsoft. She used to be president at Honey, right? And she is tight with Entus Capital. Entus Capital is one of our VCs, right? So anytime I need anything, they're going to get me someone at the Joanne Bradford caliber to help me. I mean, that's priceless. That, if you do bootstrap, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Of course, it's not impossible. There are hundreds of thousands of success stories, but it just makes your life easier. And then as a CEO, just an example, I don't have a CFO. I don't have a chief financial officer with wealth.com. I use one of the VCs. I mean, they help me, right? I have a VCs, I have a CPAs, and then just with this setup for now, it's enough for me.
I think it's interesting the point you made, and I think this is a takeaway for people that are listening that even invest in private deals. Two things you said that I think can be really relatable to private investments is when you're taking money from a VC, it's really not that different than if some private investor is going out and they're giving money to a company, whether that's in a private equity deal, in a venture capital deal. You want it to be a good financial investment, right? If you're taking money from a VC, it's got to be a good financial investment potentially for wealth. And on the flip side, it's got to be a good potential investment for them. But I think the point that you made that is really valuable for people to think about is the relationship capital that you're also gaining with that financial investment. So if you're an individual investor and you're making a private investment, what doors could that private investment potentially open for you? And much to your point, on the flip side of it, as a founder of a company that's taking venture capital money, what are the potential relationship capital that could open by taking their financial investment as well? So I think it's really twofold. And if you're an individual investor or you're a business owner thinking about taking money from somebody, you need to think about it not just from the financial component, but you also need to think about it from what is the relationship capital or what is the second level benefit that I could potentially get from this?
Jacob, I mean, yeah, spot on. That's why when I'm talking VCs, I'm always like, and VCs are getting better nowadays. They usually say, hey, I'm willing to invest X, but I'm also going to do these and these for you, right? Because they know a dollar is a dollar. And I mean, we need more than just money. We need help to grow the business, the experience, opening doors. So yeah, it makes a huge difference. So it was a little bit easier to raise capital for wealth.com. We did a seed round. We are getting ready to raise a Series A sometime in 2024. So that's the next stage in growth. The market right now, since 2022, has been a little bit tougher, as you guys probably know more than I do, right? I feel like things are starting to improve in Q4, but it's still not there. So before 2022, sometimes what all the VCs wanted was growth at all costs. Hey, if I give you this money, can you 4x in a year? Can you 5x in 2 years? Right now, the story is a little bit different. They are looking for path to profitability. Not only growth at all costs, but also a way to get there. One thing that you mentioned at the beginning of the call that I just want to make sure that I hit is when's the right time to raise capital? Now is the right time. If you have the idea, create the business plan. Don't let the market stimulate you to try to implement your idea, right? There's never a better time than now. Just act on it. You know what I mean? Waiting is not going to make things better.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, as you've kind of gone through some of these, is there any mistakes that you feel like you made or things that you wish that you would have done differently? With raising money?
There's always mistakes that you do it. There's always ways you can deploy capital better, maybe not hire a certain person or hire a certain vendor or not make I don't know if I have one example in mind, but I mean, there's always a lot of errors. If you could do over, I would, how you deploy the capital, but it's always easy looking backwards, right? It's hard in the moment. Yeah.
I
So
think
don't spend a lot of time in that. No.
one thing when we were talking a few months ago that you said that was interesting, that I think is really true, is that like you have to be really careful at the valuations that you raise at. I think everybody gets excited to raise at the highest valuation because of the PR and the news that come along with it. But the higher the valuation, the more expectations that come with it, and the better that the next 1 to 2 years have to be before you raise the next time. And that's what you were telling me. You said this year we're waiting for the right time, because if we raise it too low, it looks bad, right? Because we already took a pre-seed round at $60 million. If now they look at us and say you're worth 40, well, that looks really bad, right? Or if you wait and let's say you raise at 100 something, the next time you raise, you have to beat that, because if you're not beating that by significant numbers, it looks like the company's declining, it's less attractive, it isn't doing as well. And so not only is the money matter and you want the money, but the story the money tells is really important too.
Absolutely. And this business it's an interesting one. I mean, you work with brilliant people, right? The VCs. I mean, these guys go to the best schools, and they have the right data, access to all the data, but there's a lot of herd mentality in this space. So that's why it's kind of important to get someone that believes you, one of the VCs, because the first time that you get someone to invest in you, it's easier to get the secondary, third, the fourth to follow.
Because of the buzz it brings, right? People follow others. If a big name VC invests in you, the lineup is going to be bigger. I think I was watching the Uber show. Like there's that show on Netflix about Uber, and it kind of goes through their whole raise. And their big thing is that they're really focused on, like, you want Google's venture or whatever, right? Because that name is the name that opens up every single other door for you. And I think that's really true.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So the valuation, to your point, yes. So if you get a very high valuation, now you have a target that you have to hit in 2 years, 3 years, right? And if you don't hit that target, this contaminates the market, right? So now they're going to be, it's like a house for sale. You put a house for sale and it stays in the market. People start questioning, why it has been in the market for a month? Why is it in the market for a month and a half? The same thing with the company, right? You've let's say, hypothetically speaking, we raise at $100 million valuation, and let's say we don't get there in 3 years, people start questioning. And there are so many companies to invest. There are so many options. When a VC pass on you, they may not come back to revisit you anymore, right? So you have to be careful. And the other thing too is, if you take too much money, like a lot of companies, WeWork, Uber did, there's a lot of dilution here. So you and your employees end up owning less of the company. You also don't want that. So you're looking for the money that you actually need to implement your plan, right? So you should not get more than you needed.
One of the interesting things that you said at the beginning of this, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and your vision around it, but you essentially said we went from one business that wasn't in financial services, right? It was a non-competing business, but I was able to take my best players. And when I look at the business that you have now with Wealth, you're really tapping into a market, in my opinion, that's really underserved from a technology standpoint, right? Financial services, specifically consumer financial services, I think is relatively underdeveloped in the technology sector. So you guys are taking all these technology skills and you're saying, yes, we have this great product and solution, but really the kicker is like our technology that we can implement with it. So I'm curious, was that an intentional thought when you guys were starting Wealth? Like, we have these skills, the bar maybe over here is maybe a little bit lower for us to clear. And the reason why I asked the question is I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs now that are in what's called ETA, so entrepreneurship through acquisition, where they're saying, I'm taking skills that I'm learning maybe at a business school that I can really apply to any business and making it more operationally efficient. So was your thought process in that, like, there's really an opportunity here from a technology perspective and we'll find the solution?
You got it. I mean, the idea for me was like going to the estate planning process myself. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so old school, pen and paper. I went to visit the lawyer. The first thing he asked me was like, hey, what are your assets? Do you have a list of your assets? And I'm like, no, I don't. So I had to go home and collect the list of assets and crypto, crowdsourcing real estate. At the end of the day, I had like 22, 23 different assets. And I actually got an interesting reaction from my wife. She was like, oh my gosh, I wasn't aware of like a third of these assets. So at that moment, we're like, hey, we have a problem here. This cannot be just me, right? So everybody is probably going through the same experience. And the thing is, can we make this better? And I'm a technical founder, right? I'm a software developer by trade. I was a CTO in my previous company. So I'm like, I love problems, right? Because I believe we have the right tools to solve it. And that's like, in a nutshell, the idea for wealth. Can we combine the best asset aggregation, right? And we have connections to 14,000 banks. We have connection to Carta, Coinbase, CoinMarketCap, Zillow, and then use this information to keep your estate planning always up to date. Because why does the estate plan have to be stale? I mean, that people only update once every 20 years, right? And then financial advisors, I mean, you guys are the ones having this conversation day in, day out, right? We originally started going through employee benefit. Okay, startup, employee benefit. Start going to employee benefit. We did not see the traction. And as a startup, you learn how to move fast and pivot. So we quickly pivot to financial advisor. We got a lot of inbound from financial advisor. How can I offer this to my clients, right? So you have to pivot fast. We did it, and it's been a very fast growth.
Well, I think oftentimes the best businesses come out of your own personal problems, right? Like, what is a personal problem that I've had and how can I solve that better? So I love that you had the personal problem first. And it makes for an incredible story, right? For any consumer that's looking to potentially use wealth, you can sit there on the other side of the table and say, I've literally done this and the other options are not good. And we made a better option.
I think it's a really interesting point because that's actually what all three of us did, right? Like Raf did this, right? Went through the process, saw a problem. Well, shoot, let's make a business. Like Jacob, you were like, hey, I was an athlete, tons of problems. I didn't know who to go through financial advice. I don't know how to build a team. I don't know what to do with my money. I don't know who to trust. And people don't get it because they haven't been through it. You did that. I looked and said, hey, I'm a business owner. No, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to ask for to help on how to run this business. What entity selection? How do I set up the business? How do I pay myself? How do I invest outside of it? How do I manage my finances and live the life that I want? So I built a firm that helps serve business owners that are just like me. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that, but the best businesses and people that are most passionate about the businesses they're running are often because they're like, I'm solving the problem that existed for me. And I know that has to exist for a ton of other people. Definitely interesting.
And what blows my mind, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinion, is I'm talking to financial advisors. I usually ask, hey, ballpark number. How many clients do you think that you have that don't have estate planning? And I keep hearing 60%, 70%. So they are using a financial advisor. So they have enough money. I mean, they made the first right decision. They're using a financial advisor, right? So they have enough money to engage a financial advisor, but they don't have a estate plan. I mean, how is that possible?
My experience has been higher than that percentage wise. I think it's because it's just a painful process for most people. It's not fun. They don't really want to think about it until somebody else passes away or they're like, oh, I have kids and I'm flying out of the country. Oh, shoot. I don't want to just write a handwritten note. This is what happens with my kids. There's normally like some pain point or push that's like, oh, shoot, that's something that I really need to get done.
I think there's a couple of reasons for it. And I would say on our side, I mean, it's almost 100% that either don't have it done or they don't have it done the right way for where they're at today. And I think a lot of times it's like, okay, let's just play this out, right? Somebody has this problem. They're like, I need to get this done. Where do I go? And if their financial team has never brought up that they could help them coordinate and do the estate planning process, they don't know to go to them. So then where do they go? They go to Google and they type in estate planning attorney near me. And they think, okay, if I call this guy, what is he going to tell me? What's he going to be like? Maybe I haven't had the best experience with law firms in the past. How are they going to charge me to do this? There's all this confusion in their head because typically, and they're like, I've never done this before. And maybe the only experience, to your point, is like a previous death in the family. And maybe it went through probate and they're like, that was a terrible experience. Is that what this is? Or trust, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what questions to ask. And that's where I think it's so important to make sure that you have people on your financial team that are advising you on all aspects of your financial life and then finding those solutions for you. And that's where I think wealth plays such a critical role in this. Is it can be such a good way for an advisor to be able to talk at a high level about what needs to be implemented. And then on the back end, using a solution that provides a lot less headache for the end client and ultimately a better outcome for them.
Totally. Well, I love wealth, obviously. That's why we're part of it. I think it's definitely solving a big problem. And for everybody listening, if you want to learn more about estate planning, there's a whole series from last year before Jacob started. We're going to do some more episodes definitely talking about estate planning. But as we wrap up, Raf, I mean, what would be your advice for, business owners? I think you obviously have a lot of wisdom. You've built really great businesses. What were your top few pieces of advice that you want other business owners to take from you?
I mean, I would try to qualify my business a little bit. If you're trying to raise money, I would say, hey, do you have something that's unique? Do you have a problem, right? Or are you just trying to raise money because everybody else is doing? Do you have a problem? You have a solution. You can solve it. Do you have a team? If you're not an engineer yourself and it's a software solution, I would say find someone that you trust to implement it. I see a lot of people that they have the business acumen, but they don't have engineers or anyone that they can trust, and they just lose a lot of cash, right? Because they engage the wrong team or offshore team, and they don't have anyone to run the show. Don't sit on the sidelines. I mean, don't be like, hey, I'm going to wait until when the market improves. I know the market is not really good right now to try to raise money. Just don't do it. I mean, go for it. There's no better time than now. And fifth, relationships. Do you know anyone that have gone through the process? Reach out to them. Ask them to make introductions. That's the best way to get in front of VC, is through introductions. Just cold calling, sending emails. I mean, yeah, you can get there, but it's much harder. So try to find someone that already have a relationship developed with the VCs. But do it.
And potentially bring them on as an advisor. I think that's one thing that you guys have done well, is you've always, obviously you want to hold on to as much equity as possible, and people get really, caught in that. But sometimes giving up equity to bring on really key pieces, even if they're just strategic advisors, not full-time employees, can be a huge difference in where you get to long-term. Like, you have to surround yourself with people who have been there before, because you're going to have the problems and they're the only people who can really help solve them.
100%. You're right. Yes.
Totally. Well, Ralph, we really appreciate you coming on. I thought this was an awesome episode, and everybody, we really appreciate you listening. Please remember to rate and subscribe, and we will see you back next week.
Thank you for having me on.